Let's go.
Let's go. Oh, no.
Do you want to?
Sorry. I'll let you.
Next one.
I'm excited and I feel relaxed and I'm ready to party. Let's say sorry. You don't need to do that. You don't need to apologize. It's a fucked up female habit. You don't need to be sorry for anything ever.
Can you guess what every woman's worst nightmare is?
I don't have rage issues.
I have nothing to prove to you.
When I'm good, I'm very good. But when I'm bad, I'm better.
I say when it comes to stardom and Lauren, there are no accidents.
Hi, Karen Peterson.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Citizen Dame, the last Citizen Dame episode of the year 2024. I am Lauren Humphreys Brooks, I think, and with me, as always, is Karen Peterson.
Hello.
How has your holiday been so far, Karen? How are you doing?
It's okay. It's okay. I didn't really when we picked the movie that we're discussing today, it didn't really occur to me how much it mirrors some of what I'm going through in my life. So it was like a weird week to watch it. I mean, I'm not having an affair with the boss or anything like that, but like just the mood and the tone was just very like, oh yeah, I feel this very deeply. So that's the week I'm having.
Okay.
I'm fine.
So everybody, we're talking about The Apartment from 1960. And if you know this film, if you've seen this film, you would understand why I might be a little concerned to hear Karen say that. But you're good. You're okay?
I'm good. I just mean like the
tone,
the tone and how it's just kind of that time in between Christmas and New Year's where everything just feels, when you're alone, you feel it even more deeply than any other time of the year. And that's all. But
yeah. Well, alrighty then. Moving on.
I've been making a point to leave my house every single day and go do something. So
that is a very, very good thing. Well, no, I mean the Apartment, I think, is a really appropriate film for actually not particularly for this year necessarily, but for this time of year, because there is that weird, I think for all of us, there's that weird fugue state between Christmas and New Year's where you might still be, celebrating with family. You might not be celebrating with family at all, but it's like it's post-holiday. So whatever you've been doing, it's over, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's still all of this lingering stuff going on. Definitely, as someone who lives in New York City, and I'm currently visiting my parents in upstate New York. It's also a period where there's snow on the ground. It's often very gray and dark.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of this weird liminal space, I guess. And I think that The Apartment actually in a lot of ways captures that isolation, but at the same time being surrounded by people that like this time of year definitely sort of summons up.
I have spent the last 2 days thinking it was the 29th. It's only the 28th right now. It's not even the 29th yet.
Oh yeah, no, for me
I'm so confused.
For me, it's been the 27th ever since the 23rd. Like I was convinced that it was after Christmas. I was like, no, it can't be after Christmas because we haven't had Christmas yet. And it was like, oh, it's after Christmas, so it must be the 27th because that's what comes after Christmas for some reason. Yeah. It is now the 28th. So it's
I mean, we're fortunate here in California. It's it's our version of cold. I think the high today is 55 or something. But the sun's kind of peeking out. It is a little bit gray, but it's, we have generally nice weather. It hasn't rained this week except for I think Christmas Eve. So yeah, but it's that weird time. I'm off work because my district closes down for the week between Christmas and New Year's, and we always do. There's nothing going on in academia at this time of year. And so it's like, okay, what do I do? Everybody's traveling, or they're with other other family and stuff. So it's just kind of like, cool. Okay, well, I guess I'll go to the grocery store again. Stuff like that. It's just it's just this weird time, and it happens every year. And yeah. And and this year in particular, it's also, the last couple of months have just been hard in general for a lot of us. And specifically, there have been some things that have been hard for me. So it's, just kind of feeling the culmination of that, and not particularly, like, a lot of years I'm like, well, at least next year's going to be great. This time I'm not feeling that optimism that I normally do, which is a little bit challenging.
Yeah, it's been, I think, there are a lot of things that have been really difficult this year, in a general sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that actually The Apartment, but one of the things that I really like about this film is that you have that, but there's also this thread, not of optimism, but of hope for humanity, I guess, that like connection between the characters, connections between people, willingness for small people to do good things in small ways, even when they fuck up in others. And that's something that I like about this film. Like I know, so when we initially talked about doing this, we had talked about, I think you'd even said like, okay, you can say no. And I was like, why would I say no to this film? But you reminded me that this film does deal with some very heavy topics, including, and just to trigger warn for anyone who does not remember this movie or has not seen it or whatever, this does involve a suicide attempt, and a lot of like somewhat depressing things.
Well, not only a suicide attempt, but also some frank discussion about it too. So yeah. So I was like, oh yeah, that's true. It could kind of, it seems like a bit of a downer film, but in rewatching it, I was like, it's not so much I would have felt like a downer probably when I was like 15, but being older now and watching, I'm just like, it's not so much of a downer as it is, there's something really surprisingly real about it. For a Hollywood film, this was made in 1960, and it still has kind of that old Hollywood feel to it in a lot of ways. But for a Hollywood film, it deals very frankly with a lot of difficult things, but at the same time has this thread of humor and hope and joy that runs throughout it, and human connection. And so I think that this is actually a really appropriate film to do. Yeah.
So to remind everybody, first of all, this is right now still available to stream on Amazon, and I believe it's also available for free on Tubi. I know it's going off of Amazon, I think, at the end of the year.
Yes. Yeah, when I watched it yesterday, it said 5 days left, but it'll probably pop up somewhere else. This is a movie that's frequently available. It's also in the Criterion Collection. I don't know why I haven't bought the Blu-ray of it yet, but it's on my list.
And it's a fantastic film. So this was made in 1960, directed and written by Billy Wilder, and it stars Jack Lemmon and Shirley Maclaine, Fred MacMurray, who we're going to talk about in a minute. And it's about an insurance clerk, played by Jack Lemmon, who is kind of trying to climb up the corporate ladder of the business that he works in. And he allows his various bosses, various executives, to use his apartment on the Upper West Side to have affairs in, basically. And so he essentially rents out his apartment, and in exchange for promises, essentially, like, we're going to help you get ahead in the business, etc. Particularly to 4 different men, all of whom are having extramarital affairs. And it's about then his sort of developing relationship with Miss, what's her name?
Kubelik.
Kubelik, yes. Played by Shirley Maclaine, who's an elevator operator in the building, and Lemmon begins developing, Baxter, played by Jack Lemmon, begins developing feelings for her, not realizing that then he is giving out his apartment to Fred MacMurray, who is currently having an affair with Miss Kubelik. So there are a lot of different places to start. First of all, I do have to say, his apartment costs $85. It is on the Upper West Side in like the mid 60s, and I think he said like a couple of blocks from Central Park. And
Mhm.
I have never felt angrier in my life. Like, is it like a really nice apartment? It's an actually pretty good sized apartment, and
Yeah.
it's like a walk up. So nice space, but I like watching this just like 85 and the rent went up because his landlady installed an air conditioner. This is like $85 for an apartment on the Upper West Side, and that just made me want to die anyways.
Yeah, I'm paying significantly more than that to live in a renovated garage.
I am paying significantly more than that to live in Crown Heights. So, just not even in Manhattan, by the way. Like the Upper West Side for $85. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I feel that. And apparently that was pretty accurate price wise, so for the time period.
Price wise.
Yeah.
So where do we want to start with this one? Like I think that this is a film that, like, it has this sort of almost sitcom-y setup. It's just like, oh, it's this guy who's like renting out his apartment for men with having extramarital affairs. It feels almost like it's going to be a sex comedy, right?
Yeah.
And there is a lot of humor that's attached to it. You see these men coming in and out of the apartment, like finagling more from him, bringing these women home, picking up women and bringing them back to his apartment, all of this stuff. And so there is a lot of humor that is kind of attached to that. But the film does a really good job, I think, of highlighting how predatory these men are. Like, it's funny in a certain sense, but it is not, oh, boys will be boys. It's more like this is a really predatory action, both on their part, on the women, and also on Baxter himself.
Yeah. And the thing is that Baxter knows he's being used. He puts up with it because he wants to get ahead. He's willing to go along with these things. But he gives up so much of himself and his own autonomy in the process, to the point where he kind of gets himself into a situation that he can't really he could get himself out of it, but he just doesn't kind of have the strength, I guess. He's kind of weak in that way, because there's an early scene in the movie where one of the bosses forgot to leave his key, so he couldn't get back into his apartment. He ended up stuck outside on the stoop until like 4 o'clock in the morning, and he ends up with a cold. And so he's trying to cancel whoever's supposed to use the apartment that night, because he needs to go home and go to bed. And then it turns into this whole thing, and it's kind of funny, but it's also like, this is super fucked up, dude. Where he's having to like make multiple phone calls to people to rearrange schedules so that he can use his own apartment to recover from being sick. And it ends up with him not even getting to use it that night either, because then the big boss, Fred MacMurray, calls him and wants to get in on this deal too. So it really, you see this guy who knows he's being used, is fine with being used, but then once it becomes very inconvenient for him, is totally powerless to stop it. And then eventually what you see by the end is these guys that he's been helping out, that promised him all kinds of things, including a promotion and stuff. By the end, they just turn on him when it's no longer convenient because he is messing up their agenda,
Yeah, exactly. Well, and the undercurrent throughout all of this, and it becomes more prevalent as the film goes on, is that Baxter's in a very similar position to a lot of the women. He's being used by powerful men who are giving him promises, and for him, it's we're going to help you, get a better paying job. We're going to help you get a corner office, all of that sort of thing. But it's similar to what they're doing to the women, in the sense that what they're being promised is, and what it becomes prevalent, particularly with Miss Kubelik, is, oh, I'm going to leave my wife. We're going to get married. We're going to be happy. All of those things, and it's that sense of being strung along. And Baxter's being strung along in the same way, and knows it too. Like is kind of being like, I know that this is happening, but I might actually get ahead as a result of this. And then it winds up seriously harming him, and it winds up seriously harming others. So so much of this film is about power dynamic. And about these men being in these positions of power over people like Baxter and like Miss Kubelik, and they're abusing their power to get what they want.
And because of the time period and because of the office politics that exist, and I want to talk about the design of this office in a minute too, but because of that, someone like Baxter will never be able to get ahead because he doesn't play the game the same way anybody else does.
Yeah. It's so paltry too. Like, you know, he does get the office with the glass door and his name on the glass door. And what he gets is a view. He has a window to the outside, and he gets a direct view of all of the desks with their typewriters, right? It's like and watching it, just like, oh my God, well, that's not life. You know, that is miserable. Why would you want that even? But it's that, you know, particularly in this time period, it's that like, oh, we're going to move you up just a little bit. We're going to give you a little more power, a little more access to power. You get an office instead of just a desk. And it's the same thing with the way that the women are treated. You get a mink instead of just a coat.
Yeah.
But that's what you're selling yourself for.
Right. And when these men just dangle these promises in front of you, and it's what you want, but even if you know that you can't have it, even if you know that ultimately they're just stringing you along, you get caught in this circle, this, you know, this, you can't get out of it. And that's exactly what happens for both Baxter and Kubelik in this.
Yeah, and they both recognize it in some way. Actually, she recognizes it probably earlier than he does, because she keeps on saying, like, you know, this keeps on happening to me, basically. Why do I not resist this? Why do I keep on falling into these traps? Like, I know that this is what's happening. And you know, and she even talks about feeling like that there's must be something wrong with her, that she keeps on allowing herself to be put into these positions. And his experience is very similar to hers, except that he still maintains this hope, right? That no, it's going to be different this time. It's, you know, no, they actually are going to help me get ahead, etc. And then it becomes clearer and clearer that they will, but also they are capable of taking it away from him with, like, the second that he says, I'm not going to do what you want me to do.
Right. Which is exactly what he experiences.
It's that ability to say no. I mean, that's really what it's about. As soon as, you know, you can, and that's the same way that, like, Baxter is being, Baxter and the women are in the same position of, like, as long as you keep saying yes, you'll get things. Might not be exactly the things that you want, but as long as you keep saying yes, but you are not allowed to say no without losing everything.
Exactly.
Until they decide to just discard you because they've moved on to something else.
Right. Yeah.
So you wanted to talk about the design of the office.
I do, because I find it's just, just briefly, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I find it really fascinating because it really is. I mean, yes, it's an insurance company, but there's just so much happening and not happening in this building. It's this very tall, I think he moves up to what, the 21st or the 27th floor or something like that.
Yeah. He's on the 19th and he gets up to the 27th.
Right. Yeah. But that first floor that he's on, you know, when you see his desk and it's just in this sea of perfectly straight, you know, desks that stretch off into infinity, basically. And I really enjoy that detail of just how it's endless. It's, you know, it's this very visual representation of, there's all these people, they're sort of mindless worker bees with no personality. The only one that we really know in that pool is Baxter. And I really like the way that corporate America is represented as sort of this bleak, endless oblivion, with no end in sight and no real place to go from there. And it's sad that here we are 60 years later and nothing has changed. In fact, it's gotten worse.
Well, it highlights that there are a number of films in the 1960s and the late 50s, especially, that highlight this whole corporate America aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Of like, you know, so we're going to get ahead, right? Well, getting ahead is getting an office with a door instead of a desk.
Right.
You know, getting ahead is going from the 19th to the 27th floor.
Yep.
Getting ahead, you know, is maybe someday becoming the executive with the corner office and the family in
The key to the
suburbia.
executive washroom.
Yeah, all of that, and that's a feature of a number of films from this period, and very often it's highlighted as being like, how fucking depressing. You know, this isn't
Mhm.
real, this isn't life. And so talking about that, I like the contrast between Baxter's apartment building and the kind of waspy corporate America that he lives in, because that he works in, because his apartment building is very lived in. Like, there are all of these people. There's the doctor and his wife next door. I love Dr. Dreyfus.
I do too. He's great.
Who are like funny and fun, and I don't think it's an accident exactly that Wilder is representing most of the people who are like actually living their lives, like living in reality, as very often working class, and immigrants and Jewish, right? So people that have humanity to them are way outside of this more waspish corporate America. But there's like that lived in aspect of his apartment building, that like there's a landlady with a little dog who's like paying attention to everything that everyone is doing in the building. There's the doctor and his wife next door. At one point we meet Miss Kubelik's brother-in-law. So there is this undercurrent of like the places in New York where human beings are actually living their lives are not in these big corporate buildings. But in the apartment buildings where, you know, a whole lot of different people are mixing together and are like actually paying attention to each other's lives and are concerned about each other's lives.
Yeah.
I really like that. I like that contrast that Wilder develops.
I do too.
Real human beings.
yeah, exactly. Well, and like even the people in the apartment building, they all have this assumption about Baxter because they think he's the one with this endless parade of women in and out of his apartment. They don't, somehow, as involved as they are, they never see anybody else leaving, just him. So they don't realize, and so they have these assumptions about him, but yet people are still nice to him, even when they think he's just this playboy, you know, or whatever. They're still nice to him. And Dr. Dreyfus in particular is just kind of amused by it, I think.
Yeah.
And I like that. They're not treating him like he's, you know, this terrible person for being a playboy.
Yeah, the point where they become judgmental is after Miss Kubelik's suicide attempt, and they think that like he caused this or contributed
he
to it.
He drove her to it.
Yeah, and that's when and again, I really like so there's so much judgment of the women in particular, and particularly the way that the executive men talk about these women. You know, talk about Miss Kubelik as this thing to conquer. Use them as objects, etc. And one of the things that I really like in like the scene between Mrs. Dreyfus and Miss Kubelik is that she's like, no, you've got to get strong, you've got to get your strength up, you know, don't pay any attention to him, he's not worth it. What you want to find is a nice solid man. Like, but there's this lack of judgment, right? That there's all of this assumption about like that she's been sleeping with him, that she tried to kill herself over him, all of these things. And she's like, no, we don't worry about that. What you need is a good man. That's the problem. Right. Not him. He sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. It's a good and interesting contrast. So let's talk about Fred MacMurray.
Let's do.
Because I think that I have wronged Fred MacMurray in a certain way, because I think that this was the first movie that I ever saw him in. And I'll tell you, if this is the first movie you see of Fred MacMurray in, it's really going to color your attitude towards Fred MacMurray.
Oh, very much, yes.
Because he is the worst And I had forgotten how bad, like, I remembered him being bad. I did not remember the levels of just grossness of this character. And I give Fred MacMurray credit. He plays it really well. Like, I've met men like this. I know exactly this kind of man. I think most of us do. And it's that just smarmy combination of entitlement and power and just and like self-delusion as well, this like belief that everything that he's doing is completely reasonable and normal and natural. It's just I fucking hate him. He's a wonderful villain in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I had seen him in other things before I ever saw The Apartment, and like I had seen episodes of My Three Sons, The Happiest Millionaire, you know, a lot of stuff where he plays, you know, sort of America's dad of the 60s. But when I saw The Apartment, I remember watching, I think I first watched it on TCM, and it was being introduced by one of the hosts on there, and they were talking about how, because everyone had just known Fred MacMurray as this, you know, the quintessential dad, and everyone loved him, and then this movie really was it was against type for him, and a lot of people had reactions to it, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. And then I watched it, I was like, what is he doing? Why does he suck so bad? Yeah.
I'm like, you know, I almost have more respect for the other executives who are at least kind of upfront about what they're doing in a lot of ways. But he is just like so fucking smarmy about it.
Yeah.
Like, and so manipulative of Baxter and of Miss Kubelik. And you know, it's interesting because I think there's a good bit of her that knows that this is happening. Like, she even says, like, oh, we're going through the same thing over and over again. She's like, no, I really love you, baby. Like, it's that sort of shit. And you're just like, oh God, I understand why you would be taken in by this guy. And at the same time, it's like, why are you taken in by this guy?
Yeah. Well, the most despicable part of what he does to both of them, but especially to her, is when Baxter calls to tell him that she's attempted suicide. And he's just like, I can't get away. It's Christmas. It's like Christmas morning when he gets this phone call, and at his house. And he's just like, well, I can't do anything about it. You know, I'm here with my family. Like, he won't. And his wife comes by, and he's just like, oh, there was an accident with one of our employees. I don't know why they bother me with these things on Christmas. And he's just so cold about it and just unwilling to do anything helpful.
Yeah.
And then later, when he's talking to her about it, and he makes it all about him. Oh, you have no idea what you doing this did to me, how I was affected by this. And it's just like, what is happening? Like, this guy he's so horrible, and he's so manipulative, because he doesn't give a shit about her. Her trying to kill herself did nothing to him, but he's making it, he's twisting it around against her to make her feel bad for him, to make her feel sorry that she did that to him, when he really should just be like falling all over himself, apologizing for what he's done to her, and he never will.
Yeah, and the way that, like, you know, and you can see her being like, oh, maybe he's not that bad. You know, it is, in some ways, it's like watching you know, a friend that you know is in a bad relationship with someone, and you're just like, no, I can see exactly what this guy is doing. Why can't you? Like, no, you know, this is fucking textbook, man. Come on.
Yeah. And you just have to and this is the thing, this is one of the things that I really love about the friendship and then blossoming relationship between Baxter and Kubelik, is the fact that he's been there, he sees it, he knows what's going on, but he also knows that he can't say anything to her about this. He can't stop it. She has to figure it out herself.
Yeah. I will say that there were 2 points. Actually, it's funny that, like, that to you is the most unforgivable. There were 2 points where I like had to take a moment of like, oh my God, I hate you so much. The first is when he doesn't get her a Christmas present and gives her $100 and stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And you know, and she takes it as, oh, paying for me. Like,
Right. Yeah. You're paying
and
me to have sex now.
yeah, and of course, and that it's absolutely correct, but there's just something so like, oh God, like you're just, there's that, and then there's the revelation that his secretary has, that, oh, he's not just done this to you, he's done this to multiple people, including me. And this whole thing about, and I think at one point she says to him, this like, he fires her, right? Because she told his wife. No, because she
Well,
told
no,
Hubert.
yeah. She calls his wife after he fires her.
But she says like something about like, the worst cruelty was not what you did to me. The worst was that I sat out there for months watching my replacements come in. Yeah. And that's it's just like this, it's the fact that this establishes a pattern. This isn't just him doing this to one woman. He's done this to multiple women, all of them, people, and it's again that power dynamic, people that are under him, people that depend on him, people that can lose their jobs if they say no to him. And then had her sitting there as his secretary for months afterwards, watching him doing the same thing to other women.
Yeah.
Just like that cruelty and that lack of care about other people's feelings. And also that sense of power, right? That like, I can do this to you. I can continue to control your life and have power over you, because if you say anything, you lose your job, which is exactly what happens. Yeah. Those are the two moments of that I was just like, someone shove him out a window, please.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, the first time that we meet him, I mean, this, out of all the things that we've already talked about, this is probably the least bad. But the very first time we meet him is, like I was talking about before, when Baxter has a cold and he's rearranging things so that he can just go home to sleep and feel better. And Sheldrake calls him up and is just like, I want to use your apartment. And he's trying to explain, like, I can't tonight. This is not going to work. And he just forces it. I'm going to give you theater tickets, and just kind of forces his way in. Right from the beginning, he's established that he does not take no for an answer, and he's going to get what he wants, and he does not care how that affects other people.
Yeah. Yep. God damn it, Fred MacMurray. You're great. I hate you so much.
He's the worst, and he's so good at it.
He's very good at it. All right, let's see, what else would we like to talk about?
Well, I would like to talk a little bit more specifically about the relationship between Baxter and Kubelik Fran.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we've touched on this a little bit, but, I mean, they understand each other because they are both kind of living in mirrored situations. But I really enjoy how their friendship, first as a friendship, starts off with him just being the one person that's polite and kind to her. She's the elevator girl. He is the only one, she comments, he's the only one that takes his hat off when he gets into the elevator, and that shows respect. And when he gets these theater tickets, she's the one that he wants to ask to go. And and they spend so much time getting to know each other. And and then and part of that is because she tries to kill herself in his apartment, and he lets her stay there, kind of insists on her staying there to recover, because it's a pretty traumatic thing. One of the things that I really like about the way that whole thing is set up, when he comes home with a date that he's kind of picked up in a bar because he's depressed, and he finds her there, and there's this there's an urgency, obviously, because there's a woman dying in his apartment, but he never judges her for what she did. He never judges her for the choice that she made. And he has so much compassion. And there's a scene a little bit later on where he actually explains that he's been there too.
Yeah.
And he tells this whole story about how he tried to shoot himself and that didn't work out. And it's not, I mean, it's kind of funny the way that he's talking about it and what ultimately happened when he was trying to do it, but it's not about laughs. It's really about these two bonding and realizing how much they do have in common. And one of the things I really like about that conversation where he's sharing with her is there's something so real about it that I feel like, maybe I'm wrong, I feel like it's really subtle, because that's the kind of conversation you can only have with someone when you really have been through it. And like I've had, he doesn't panic when he finds her. Like I was saying, it's urgent, but it's not like he's not freaking out. He's just like, okay, this needs to be dealt with. And he goes right to the doctor next door.
Yeah.
And then he's able to just calmly talk with her about it. And I really appreciate the sensitivity that is used with it. It's never used as a joke. And this is, I mean, Billy Wilder is just such a master of writing. But it's also just the way that they play it too. And I feel like there's just so much intimacy, I think, in the way that they share with each other. And I think that goes such a long way for both of their characters to ultimately be able to have the strength to stand up to him individually, separately, without even knowing the other one's going to do that. And I just really love that. Watching the two of them together, but especially that one scene.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's a I think I agree with everything that you said. I think that you said it quite well.
Thank you.
There's an affinity that develops between them. Just as you were talking, I was thinking about how, like you say, Baxter doesn't panic. He also doesn't think about himself.
Right.
And he doesn't think like, oh my God, someone's tried to kill themselves in my apartment. It's like what he's concerned about is this young woman. It doesn't, like, it could have been anybody really. He would have the same reaction. He reacts specifically to her, right? And he also knows her situation at this point. He knows that, she's having an affair with Sheldrake. And all that. And it's previous to that, because like he's figured it out, right? She never because he sees the broken mirror. Right, which he found in his apartment and then gives back to Sheldrake. Sorry.
Yeah, and then he borrows the mirror from her and he sees that it's broken, and that's how he realizes that she's the one that he was with.
And right before that, he was talking to her about how she's a decent girl. And there is this character growth that goes on with him is because he's never really come into contact with any of the women who his executive bosses, right, have brought back. And so he has certain assumptions about who these women are and who these men are. And then he's kind of faced with this young woman who is, in fact, a decent girl, just a normal, nice person, right? Who is having an affair and is using this apartment for assignations. And it's that point where he gets upset by it, but he also ultimately chooses not to judge her for it. He doesn't stop thinking that she's a decent girl. And that's part of his character growth as well. And so, and I think that gets developed as well, like when he finds her, when he finds, she's nearly dead and he gets the doctor and everything, all of it. And she even says to him at one point, like, oh God, what am I doing to you? And he's like, oh, don't worry about me. They think that I'm this big playboy. Like, who cares about? But it is this attitude of like, it doesn't matter what they think of me, right?
Right.
It's like, I want to help you. So blame everything on me. That's fine. I've already lost them anyways.
Yeah.
But the fact that he isn't selfish about, like, with her specifically, he's not getting anything by not being selfish. He's just being that. That's just who he is. He's more worried about her and saving her life and protecting her than he is about anything else.
Yeah. And I do think that part of that comes from the fact that he's been there. He knows what I mean, not in exactly her shoes, but he's been so depressed over a relationship that he was at that point too. He gets it. He gets it on a level that other people don't and can't.
Yeah, and that whole explanation, that whole story that he tells is both, like you say, it's funny because there's this, the cop shows up and he ends up shooting himself in the leg. And it's funny, right? And she laughs at it and he laughs at it. But then he ends that by saying, like, I got over the girl in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And it is this, like, encouraging her in a very real sense, right? That you're gonna survive this. You're not gonna survive killing yourself, but you are gonna survive a bad relationship or a longing for someone that you can't have. This is something you're gonna get over. And there's just something very sweet about that without him coming right out and like telling her that. And the other scene that I really like is the gin game, where she's in bed and they begin playing gin and she keeps on talking. And like she's spiraling almost. Like she's like, oh God, what am I gonna, what is wrong with me? What am I gonna do with my life? This has all been so crazy. I can't believe that all of this is happening. There's something, and she keeps on talking about there being something off with her, there being something wrong with her. And at one point he's just like, well, you're just gonna have to play the cards you have because I have gin.
Yeah. It's
like bringing everything back to this very simple, straightforward thing where he's not going to sit there and argue with her about, her personality or anything like that. It's just like, I think you're going to have to just keep on playing the game. And there's something really uplifting about that, and talking her through it and keeping her focused on something without giving advice that he can't give. Without him trying to tell her, oh no, you're actually, you're a good person, or, you could change your life. He's not proselytizing her, nothing like that. He's just saying, like, you need to play your cards.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way that the suicide attempt is handled throughout, like within this film, is really fascinating. I think it's what makes this film so long-lived and so surprising in a lot of ways, because it deals with this issue head on. Like, there's no euphemism going on here. And in fact, you get the entire process with Dr. Dreyfus, like getting her to throw up the sleeping pills, putting coffee in her, giving her a shot, making her walk around. It's very straightforward. It's
slapping her in the face.
Yeah, here's what we do, right? In this instance. And you can't bulk away from that. You can't be like, oh no, I don't want to look at it. And it's showing it to the audience as much as to Baxter. Like, this is a reality. Without judgment, right? Without saying, like, she's a bad person for doing this. There's not, this is 1960, so there's none of this Hays Code bullshit going on anymore. She's not going to have to be morally punished for having an affair with a married man or for trying to kill herself. This is just the reality. We like her, and she's done things that, according to the moral code of the 1960s, are not okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, really, everybody in this movie does that to some extent. So there's no one here is innocent, but that's okay because they're all human.
Yeah, exactly. Except for Fred MacMurray.
Except for Fred MacMurray, who is just evil.
Who's just the worst.
The worst.
But like, even Baxter, like, you see how how he's using and judging the women as well. He's making, he's trying to profit off of a situation that is not a good one, that is like these men behaving not just in like, oh, they're having affairs, but very predatory. It's represented as being very predatory. It's not like they're having an extramarital affair. That's kind of a morally neutral space in a lot of ways, but it's the way that they're doing it. They're manipulating these women as well. Like, there's one guy who's, saying that, oh, this apartment belongs to my dear old mother. All of that shit. And then, we get Sheldrake, who is, holding out these promises like, I'm going to leave my wife. I love you, all of those things. And it's a game that he's played before. He doesn't mean any of it.
And not only does he tell her, I'm going to leave my wife, he tells her, I went to a lawyer this morning to start the process. Like, that's the lengths that he goes to.
Yeah, because he sees losing her and losing his power over her. And he can't have that because he wants her until he stops wanting her, basically.
Right.
And then even like, he's like, oh, he's left. He tells her like, oh, I left my wife. It's just like, your wife kicked you out.
Yeah. She threw your ass out on the street.
Yeah. So now you're going to the next woman who will take care of you.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll drop her the second that you think you have someone else.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then he's staying at like the club or whatever. So he can't have guests there, but she's living with her sister and brother-in-law. And so then it ends up going to this scene with him basically just demanding from Baxter, like, give me the key, give me the key. I need to use your apartment tonight. And I love this scene because Baxter finally stands up to him. Baxter, you think he's giving in. He hands him the key. And it's just like, oh man, what are you doing, buddy? What are you doing? And he goes back into his office, and then Sheldrake comes in and says, this is the wrong key. No, it's not. That's the right key. It's to the executive washroom. That's how he basically submits his resignation. Like, I'm done. I don't need this. You're out of my life. I'm leaving.
Mm-hmm. And that's ultimately learning about that is what finally makes her go like, okay, if he can do it, I can do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you've got this wonderful scene where when Baxter says, I love you. I love you, Miss Kubrick.
She comes back. Yeah, she comes back to his apartment. They're finishing their gin game. He's packing up to move because he has to give up his apartment.
And I like her saying, we'll send him a fruitcake every Christmas.
Which is a callback. There's so many callbacks in this movie. Something will come up and then later on they'll call back to it. Yeah. It's great. And that's one of them because he tells that story about that girl and he gets a fruitcake from her every Christmas.
It's a beautifully structured film in a lot of ways. I mean, Billy Wilder is a fantastic director. He's a fantastic writer. And he strikes that balance between that melancholy that we were talking about earlier, that sense of isolation. And I do have to say, this is a very New York City film. Because there are very few cities, there are no cities like New York. But one of the things that you really do experience when you're in New York, and it can be positive and negative, is you are constantly surrounded by people, constantly. No matter where you are, if you're even alone in your apartment, you're still surrounded by people. And that can be really nice and communal. And it can also be incredibly isolating, depending upon, how you're feeling, depending upon what is going on in your life. And this film really gets at how you could experience that isolation. And it's very much about two people who are quite lonely. Baxter and Miss Kubelik are both very lonely people in a lot of ways. And they find this community with each other. And they find a little bit more of a community. Even Baxter's even finding a community with, the people in his building. And it's just, I don't know, it's just this very New York story. And it hits that balance of like this humor and that melancholy at the same time, that it is not a downer of a film. But it's also not naively optimistic, everything is going to be fine.
Yeah. One of the other kind of not smaller detail, but one of the other things that I like about it is, especially the ending, is, we see him packing, we see him find the gun and toss it in a box. And then when she is running, she's ditched Sheldrake, she's left him, and she runs to Baxter's apartment, and she's running up the stairs and she hears the pop. And we all think, oh my gosh, like, did he just shoot himself? And that's what she thinks. And so she goes running, pounds on the door, and then he answers the door and he's holding a bottle of champagne. And it's funny because it's like, oh, good, he didn't kill himself. But also, I enjoy just the tiny little detail that he's all alone on New Year's Eve. Nothing has worked out for him. He's just quit his job. He's leaving his apartment. He has no idea where he's going. And yet, you know what? He's gonna enjoy that fucking bottle of champagne. He's all by himself. He's gonna pop it for himself, and he does. And then she shows up, and he has someone to celebrate with. But he's come so far that he's even though he's alone, even though he's lonely, he's no longer depressed. He's just gonna live his life, and I just enjoy that.
Yeah, I think that some of his loneliness is about this like push to climb this corporate ladder, that he doesn't really have a life.
Yeah.
Like his life is, he can barely live in his own apartment. His life is like constantly, oh, we're gonna get the office, etc. And he's not having any fun. He's not. I at one point when watching this film, I joked to my parents. I was like, he's bearing all of the consequences and having none of the fun.
Mm-hmm.
And it's true. It's like he's not even having the fun of being this playboy because he's not actually a playboy. It's everybody else.
Right.
But he's having to deal with all of the consequences of it. And finally he's kind of free. Like he doesn't know what he's doing, but he's free. And so is she.
Yeah. And then he tries to tell her that he loves her, and she just says, shut up and deal. It's just so perfect.
It's perfect. It's a great ending. And it does give you hope for the two of them. They understand each other.
Yeah.
So this film did win 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. It was nominated
for 10, I think.
Yeah, it was also nominated for actor, actress, cinematography, sound. It won for Best Picture, Director, Best Screenplay, Art Direction, and Film Editing.
Yeah. Also, I think it's interesting because Jack Christian was nominated for supporting actor. He plays Dr. Dreyfus. And I just find that interesting that he was nominated as Fred MacMurray.
Dr. Dreyfus is awesome, though.
Oh, he's great.
So cool.
I love him. He's so good. It's just funny because it's like Fred MacMurray. Like, how did that not happen?
I love the running gag of he's like, Mildred, he's at it again. Like, I just love that like whole process. And that's where the comedy comes in as well. That whole process of misunderstanding of like, they've decided that this poor guy who's, again, having none of the fun, really.
Right.
Is undoubtedly like this crazy playboy / he's like drinking all the time, he's partying all the time, like he's got 3 or 4 women coming out of his apartment every night. It's just like, you should leave your body to medical science because I'd be really interested in all of that.
Oh my gosh, another part too. Dr. Dreyfus is involved in it, but it's when he brings that woman home from the bar who's been talking about her husband being locked up in Cuba. And they come into his apartment and she's trying to get ice and she like breaks a nail or something. And she's like, you need a new refrigerator. And he has just found Fran in his bed dying. And he rushes out to the door to go get the doctor. And she's like, I didn't mean right now.
She has some great lines as well, that woman. She's got a line about like, twas the night before Christmas and not a creature was stirring, nothing, nada, zip, no action.
Yeah. It's very funny. It's very moving. This is just such a perfect movie.
It really is. It's a lot of fun. So any final thoughts on this one? Other than the fact that it's great and we love it?
I think that's it. Well, the other thing, we didn't talk about this, but about Shirley Maclaine and her performance and the way the character is written, I really appreciate that she's not just a manic pixie dream girl. I think there are a lot of those types of characters that are specifically based on or derived from Fran Kubelik. Yeah. And it's such such a misunderstanding of her character, because she's not that. She's actually, I mean, she is being used, but she also has a lot of autonomy, and she understands, and she's got a good head on her shoulders. She's just, love is really tricky, and the heart sucks sometimes. And she's a smart, capable person, and I really like that she is, she's got depth, and there's so much more to her than just being this girl that kind of flits around and
she's savvy. She has a certain kind of innocence to her, but also not. Like, she's aware, I think, in one way, of who Sheldrake really is, but she also wants to believe that he's not that, which is completely understandable. Like, and she even says at one point, he doesn't care about me, and I still love him. Like, it is this, like, how, and that is that attitude of, like, what is wrong with me, that I still love this man, even though she knows everything. Like, she really does know what sort of a man he is, but she doesn't want him to be that.
Yep, exactly.
So yeah, she is fantastic. Great performances all around. Jack Lemmon is fantastic. I said Fred MacMurray really, like, honestly is. Shirley Maclaine is. Yeah, it's a great cast. It's very funny and very melancholic without being sad, I think.
Yeah, it's not depressing.
Yeah. So I think that's going to close us out for 2024. Wow. We will be back.
Oof, you made it.
Yeah, it's okay. We're recording this on December 28th. So almost there. But by the time you're listening to this, it should be New Year's Eve, actually.
Yeah.
So definitely, if you need something to watch on New Year's Eve, watch The Apartment. And we will be back next week. Next week, we're going to have actually kind of a grab bag episode. We're going to talk about some of the films that we've been watching for 2024 and what we've enjoyed, maybe what we haven't. As we speak, I'm down to the last 2 Hitchcock films in my Hitchcock challenge.
Woohoo!
Which I am quite excited about. There was a period there I was like, I don't know if I'm going to make it, but I'm down to the last 2, so hopefully.
I always believed in you.
Getting an A+ in Hitchcock, which is possible to get, normal to want. And so, yeah, we're going to be talking about what we've been watching next week. And so in our upcoming episodes, we have some interesting things. So we're going to talk about what we've been watching next week. And then we are going to discuss, hopefully, Robert Eggers' Nosferatu.
Yay, I'm so excited.
So we'll see if Karen and Nanina and a few other people are correct and I loved it, or this is the film for which Eggers fails me. I really hope not. I've been very excited about this film since I knew it existed.
I will be so shocked and so sad if you don't love it.
I will be so shocked and so sad if I don't love it too. I want to. I badly want to. So does my tattoo. My gigantic Nosferatu tattoo really wants me to love Nosferatu. And then after that, we're also going to talk about A Face in the Crowd, which we are timing to coincide with the inauguration of someone that we don't particularly like very much.
That is putting it mildly.
Yeah, it really makes sense if you have seen A Face in the Crowd.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's our upcoming episodes, which I think it's gonna be fun, regardless of anything else. I think it's gonna be fun. So we will be talking to you next week. And of course, we want to thank our wonderful patrons, who include Abby, Ali, Audra, Brian, Connor, Estefania, Ferdinand, Heather, James, Judy, Carriata, Matt, Michelle, Monty, Nanina, Noel, Robert, Steve, Sharon, and Tao. Thank you for continuing to support us, guys. If anyone is still owed anything, please let me know. I think all of the buttons and stickers, etc., have gone out. But if someone has not received them, please let me know and I will get them out immediately. And you can join their number. Our Patreon is patreon.com/citizendame. And you can get all of our episodes about Our Flag Means Death, which we just finished doing a couple weeks ago. Wow. And we will also have a new bonus series coming up, and we're going to let our patrons vote on that. We have a couple of different series that we've been talking about. And you can also let us know if there's something that you would really like for us to do. Please no like 12 season.
Yeah. We're not
television
doing The Sopranos.
No, we're not doing The Sopranos. I'm not going to try to propose doing Bob's Burgers or anything like that. But yeah, if there's something you'd like us to talk about, we would love to know. You can also contribute to our Ko-Fi. It's ko-fi.com/citizendame. And we have our website, citizendamepod.com, where I know that Karen has been posting reviews and links and all sorts of fun little things. You can also get in touch with us via email at citizendamepod@gmail.com. And we have our various socials. On Instagram and Blue Sky, we are at Citizen Dame Pod, and our Letterboxd is at Citizen Dame, and you can find links to all of our episodes, lists, and fun things there as well. And of course, you can get in touch with us individually. Karen, where are you?
I am all the places, but especially Blue Sky, Instagram, and Letterboxd at Karen M. Peterson.
And I am not all the places, but I am on Instagram and Letterboxd at LH Business. So that will close us out for this year. Thank you so much for listening.
Happy New Year.
I love you, Miss Kubelik.
3. Queen.
Did you hear what I said, Miss Kubelik? I absolutely adore you.
Shut up and deal.